I never imagined that carrying a tray of champagne, flutes could change my life. The Crystal Lounge wasn't the kind of place where people like me belonged. Marble floors so polished I could see my nervous reflection, chandeliers dripping with crystals that probably cost more than my annual rent, and guests whose watches alone could fund a small country. I was just a waitress, filling in for my sick coworker, trying not to trip over my own feet. The private dining room on the third floor was reserved for what my manager called VIP business negotiations. Translation: men in expensive suits making deals I'd never understand. My job was simple: deliver drinks, stay invisible, collect my paycheck. I balanced the tray carefully as I pushed through the heavy mahogany doors. The room fell silent the moment I entered. 6 men sat around an obsidian table, but my eyes went immediately to the one at the head. He couldn't have been older than 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that looked carved from stone, sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim lighting. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his body, and when those eyes flicked to me, my breath caught. Not because he was handsome, though he was devastatingly so, because he looked at me like I was already a problem he was calculating how to solve. "Gentlemen," a heavy, set man with a thick Russian accent said, not even glancing my way, "we have been patient, but patience has limits. 600 million is not a number we take lightly." I began distributing the champagne, my hands surprisingly steady despite the tension crackling through the air. The Italian man at the head of the table, the one whose gaze I could still feel on my skin, hadn't spoken yet. "The terms you propose are unacceptable." Another man said, American this time, his face flushed red with what looked like barely controlled anger. "You want controlling interest in our ports, our shipping lanes, our entire East Coast operation, and you offer us what? A partnership where you hold all the cards. I offer you survival." The Italian man finally spoke, and his voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet, smooth as aged whiskey with an accent that turned each word into something almost hypnotic. "Without my protection, the Kozlov family will eliminate your operation within 6 months. You know this, I know this. This negotiation is a courtesy." I placed a glass in front of him. His fingers brushed mine as he reached for it. Probably accidental, but the contact sent an electric jolt up my arm. The Russian man slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. "You insult us with your arrogance, Donna Salvatore. You think because you control Chicago, because your family name carries weight, that we should bow to." "Nikolai," Dante interrupted, his voice still quiet. "Choose your next words carefully." I shouldn't have been listening. I should have finished serving and left. But something in his tone made me freeze, made every instinct in my body scream danger. The American businessman stood abruptly. "We're done here. You want 600 million in infrastructure and you won't even guarantee our safety. Our family's safety. You expect us to hand over everything we've built and trust a man whose own father was..." He stopped. Dante hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked, but somehow the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. "My father," Dante said softly, "is not part of this conversation." I was at the sideboard now, my back to them. But I could feel the violence building in the air like static before a lightning strike. These weren't normal businessmen. The gun I'd glimpsed in the Russian man's shoulder holster, the scars on the American's knuckles, the way they all carried themselves, predators in expensive suits. "We need guarantees." The American pressed, apparently too angry to read the room. "We need assurances that you'll actually protect our interests, that this isn't just a takeover disguised as, you speak of my father." Dante cut in, his voice like a blade. "And now you question my word. Both are capital offenses in my world." The silence that followed was suffocating. I turned slightly, unable to help myself, and saw that Dante had stood. He wasn't tall, maybe 6 feet, but he commanded the space like he owned it. Like he owned everything, perhaps. The Russian man said, clearly trying to salvage the situation. "Would take a brief recess. Tempers are high and, the deal is off." The American announced, "We'll take our chances with Kozlov." Even I knew that was a death sentence. And I was just a waitress who'd walked into the wrong room. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. These men were walking away from his protection, which meant they were walking into an early grave. And from the flash of something, frustration, anger, in his eyes I realized this mattered to him more than he was letting on. The men were standing now, preparing to leave. $600 million walking out the door. And more than that, I didn't understand the politics. But I understood enough to know this was about power, about territory, about things worth killing for. My heart was pounding. None of this was my business. I should leave. But I'd grown up in neighborhoods where men like this operated. My father had worked in the ports before he died, had come home with stories about the real powers that ran the city. And I'd learned something from those stories. Men with pride would burn their own kingdoms rather than show weakness. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the champagne I'd delivered earlier making them all reckless. Maybe it was the memory of my father's face when he'd lost his job to politics. He couldn't fight. Maybe it was something in Dante's eyes, a flash of genuine frustration that made him seem almost human. I picked up a champagne bottle to refill glasses that didn't need refilling, and I moved closer to the table. "Excuse me," I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. I immediately regretted speaking. "What?" the American snapped. I looked at Dante. I don't know why. Maybe because he was the only one who didn't look at me like I was an insect. And the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "The Kozlov family is meeting with the Harbor Commission tomorrow at 9 a.m. My uncle works building maintenance there. He mentioned it because they've never requested that conference room before, the one with no security cameras. The room went absolutely still. "Why?" Dante said softly. His eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin burn. "Would a waitress know this?" "I pay attention," I whispered, then louder. "And you?" I looked at the American businessman, emboldened by terror now. "You asked for guarantees of protection. He just offered you survival. But you're making this about ego." The Russian man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "The little mouse has teeth. She's right," Dante said, still watching me with those impossibly dark eyes. "The Harbor Commission meeting. Kozlov is moving faster than anticipated. If you walk out of here, gentlemen, you won't make it to the weekend." The American's face had gone pale. "How do we know she's telling the truth?" "Because," Dante said quietly, "she has no reason to lie, and everything to lose by speaking." He was right. I just inserted myself into something dangerous, something I didn't understand. These were men who made people disappear. The businessmen sat back down slowly. "The terms. We need to revisit the terms." And just like that, the deal was back on the table. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt Dante's gaze on me like a physical weight, studying me, calculating, seeing something in me I didn't know existed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena," I managed. "Elena Costa." He nodded once, a gesture that felt like a binding contract. "Finish serving, Elena. Then wait outside." It wasn't a request. My hands trembled as I poured the champagne, as the men around the table began negotiating again, their voices low and urgent. And when I finally left the room, closing those heavy doors behind me, I leaned against the wall in the hallway and tried to catch my breath. I just saved a $600 million deal. I just caught the attention of a man who looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. And I had absolutely no idea what happened next. The hallway was silent except for the muffled voices from behind the mahogany doors. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart still racing, my mind spinning with what I'd just done. "Stay invisible," my manager had said. "Don't speak unless spoken to." I'd violated both rules spectacularly. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. My feet ached in the heels they made us wear, and I debated leaving. He'd said to wait, but maybe he'd forgotten. Maybe they were so deep in negotiations that the doors opened. The businessman filed out first, the American, the Russian, 2 others I hadn't registered before. They barely glanced at me as they passed, already on their phones, already moving to whatever came next in their dangerous world. Then Dante emerged. He paused when he saw me, and something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, that I'd actually waited. He said something in Italian to the man beside him, a scarred, muscular figure who looked like violence personified. The man nodded and walked away, leaving us alone. "You waited," Dante observed. "You told me too. Most people don't follow instructions from strangers. You didn't seem like the kind of man whose instructions were optional." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close, perceptive. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes moving over my face like he was memorizing every detail. "How did you really know about the Harbor Commission meeting?" "I told you. My uncle." "Your uncle works building maintenance." "Yes, but maintenance workers don't typically know the specifics of private meetings. Certainly not meetings arranged by Russian organized crime families." My mouth went dry. I pay attention." He mentioned it seemed strange, the room request, the timing. "I put pieces together." "You put pieces together," he repeated slowly. "And you decided to share this information with a room full of strangers. Why?" I didn't have a good answer. Because standing there under his scrutiny, I realized how insane it had been. These were dangerous men. I'd inserted myself into their world without invitation, without protection. I don't know, I admitted. It seemed important. The deal, I mean, and you looked frustrated, he echoed, and this time his expression definitely shifted, something between amusement and genuine curiosity. You read my frustration from across a room while serving champagne. My father always said the most important conversations happen around people who seem invisible. The words came out before I could stop them, and I immediately wished I could take them back. Too personal, too revealing, but Dante's eyes sharpened with interest. Your father was a wise man. Past tense. He died 3 years ago. Port accident. Something flickered in his expression, recognition maybe, or calculation. Costa, your father was Matteo Costa. I froze. You knew him. Off him. He was involved in the union disputes, wasn't he? Tried to organize the workers against certain interests. The way he said it made my blood run cold. My father's death had been ruled an accident, but my mother had never believed it. The timing had been too convenient, happening just days before a crucial union vote. It was an accident, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Dante watched me with those dark, knowing eyes. Of course it was. We stood there in the hallway, the silence stretching between us like a wire-pulled taut. I should leave. I should thank him for whatever this was and disappear back into my invisible life. Elena Costa, he said quietly, like he was testing how my name felt in his mouth. You've presented me with an interesting problem. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I should go. The information you provided was valuable. Accurate. It saved me significant time and resources. He stepped closer, not threatening, but suddenly the hallway felt smaller. Which means certain people will want to know where it came from. Fear spiked through me. I didn't tell anyone else. I won't. I know you won't. He said it with such certainty that I believed him. But you've made yourself visible, Elena. And visibility in my world is dangerous. Then I'll disappear again. I'm good at being invisible. Are you? He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made me feel naked despite being fully clothed. Because from where I'm standing, you seem incapable of it. I didn't know what to say to that. Someone will look into you now. He continued, his voice matter of fact. The Russians, most likely. They'll want to verify your information, trace your connections, ensure you're not a threat or an asset they should acquire. Acquire. The word stuck in my throat. This is not a kind world, Elena. You helped me tonight, which means you may have made yourself a target. He paused, something shifting in his expression. I don't leave debts unpaid, and I don't abandon those who've proven useful. I don't need protection, I said quickly, though we both knew it was a lie. No. He pulled a card from his inner jacket pocket, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just a phone number, no name. Keep this. If anything unusual happens, anyone approaches you, anything at all makes you uncomfortable, you call that number immediately. I stared at the card like it was a snake. Taking it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I'm just a waitress, I whispered. You were just a waitress. He pressed the card into my palm, his fingers warm against my skin. The moment you spoke in that room, you became something else. The question is what you choose to do with that. My fingers closed around the card automatically. And if I choose to throw this away and forget tonight ever happened, then you're not as intelligent as I think you are. He stepped back, creating distance between us again, but I could still feel the heat of where he'd touched me. Go home, Elena, be careful. And remember, visibility can be protection or exposure. It depends on who's watching. He turned to leave, his footsteps silent on the marble floor despite his obvious power. Mr. Salvatore. I called out, surprising myself. He stopped, glanced back over his shoulder. Why did you tell me to wait? If I was just a waitress who got lucky with information. Why not dismiss me? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, because lucky doesn't exist in my world. Everything happens for a reason, even if we don't understand it yet, and something tells me our paths crossed tonight for more than chance. Then he was gone, disappearing around the corner with a grace that seemed impossible for a man who carried such weight. I stood alone in the hallway, the card burning in my palm, my heart hammering against my ribs. Visibility can be protection or exposure. I looked down at the simple white card, at the single phone number embossed in black. No name, no title. Just a lifeline to a man whose world operated in shadows and violence and rules I didn't understand. I should throw it away. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and headed for the staff exit, hyper-aware of every camera, every shadow, every person who might be watching. My life as an invisible waitress had ended the moment I'd opened my mouth. I just didn't know yet what I'd become instead. 3 days passed. I went to work at the Crystal Lounge, served drinks, smiled politely, and tried to pretend nothing had changed. But every time the door to the VIP section opened, my heart jumped. Every dark-haired man in an expensive suit made me freeze. Dante Salvatore didn't return. The card stayed in my wallet, a constant weight I couldn't ignore. "You've been jumpy all week," my coworker Sophia said as we cleared tables after the lunch rush. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I lied. "Just tired." She gave me a knowing look but didn't push. Sophia had worked at the lounge for 5 years, long enough to recognize when someone was carrying secrets they couldn't share. I was stacking dirty glasses when my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Your uncle mentioned a leak in his building. 3rd floor conference room. Might want to call him." My blood turned to ice. I'd told Dante about my uncle in passing, a throwaway detail. But this message, it was both a warning and a test. Someone was looking into me, exactly like he'd predicted. My hands trembled as I texted my uncle. His response came quickly. "What leak?" "Everything's fine here," which meant someone had been asking questions. Using my family to get to information, I pulled Dante's card from my wallet, stared at the number. "Don't be dramatic," I told myself. "Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you're paranoid." But the text had come from an unknown number, and it referenced details only someone tracking me would know. I called. He answered on the second ring. "Elena." Just my name spoken in that quiet, certain voice, and somehow the vice around my chest loosened slightly. "I got a text," I said. "About my uncle. Someone's asking questions." "I know. Where are you right now?" "Work. The Crystal Lounge. Stay there. Stay visible, stay around people. I'm sending someone. I don't need." "This isn't a negotiation." His tone brooked no argument. 20 minutes. "A man named Luca will meet you at the staff entrance. Dark suit, scar across his left eyebrow. Go with him." "Go with him where?" "Somewhere safe while we address the problem." My pride wanted to refuse, but my survival instinct was louder. "Okay, Elena." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You were right to call." The line went dead. Luca arrived exactly 20 minutes later, the same scarred man who'd been with Dante in the hallway. He didn't smile, didn't offer explanations. Just, "Miss Costa." "This way." The car was a black SUV with tinted windows. I climbed in before I could second-guess myself. We drove through the city in silence, winding through neighborhoods that grew progressively more upscale. Finally, we pulled through iron gates into an estate that made the Crystal Lounge look modest. The mansion was modern stone and glass, perched on a cliff overlooking the lake. Security cameras tracked our approach. Men in suits patrolled the grounds with the practiced awareness of soldiers. "Mr. Salvatore is in his office," Luca said, opening my door. "2nd floor, end of the hall." I walked through a foyer with marble floors, and a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. Artwork that looked museum quality lined the walls. Everything screamed wealth and power and danger. His office door was open. Dante stood at floor, tip-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, a phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking rapid Italian, his tone cold and clipped. When he saw me, he ended the call without preamble. "You came," he said. "You didn't really give me a choice." "There's always a choice, Elena. You could have ignored the warning, dismissed the text, pretended everything was fine." He moved toward a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "The fact that you didn't tells me you understand the situation better than you want to admit." He offered me a glass. I took it but didn't drink. "What situation exactly?" I asked. "Because 3 days ago I was a waitress who eavesdropped on the wrong conversation. Now I'm in a mansion with armed guards because someone sent me a vaguely threatening text." "Not vaguely threatening. Specifically threatening." He took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim. "The Russians are trying to identify my source. They know the Harbor Commission information was too precise to be coincidence. They've been questioning staff at the lounge, tracing connections, following leads. And they found me. They found your uncle. Which led them to you. Which means they now know you have access to information they want." He set his glass down, his expression hardening. "In my world, people who have valuable information become assets or liabilities. There's no middle ground. So which am I?" "That depends." He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to step back. "The Russians will approach you. They'll offer money, probably. Threaten your family if you refuse. They'll want you to spy on me, feed them information, become their eyes and ears inside my operation. I don't have access to your operation. I served champagne once. You have access to me. His eyes held mine, intense and unreadable. I gave you my private number. I brought you to my home. That makes you valuable. The weight of what he was saying settled over me like a shroud. Then I've put myself in danger for no reason. I should leave the city, disappear. Running makes you look guilty. And the Russians have long memories. He paused. There's another option. Which is, you work for me. I stared at him. What? Not as a spy, not as anything dangerous. He moved to his desk, pulled out a folder. I own several legitimate businesses, restaurants, a gallery, real estate holdings. The Crystal Lounge, for instance. You own the lounge. My mind reeled, among other things. I need someone I can trust in positions where they see and hear things. Someone intelligent enough to know what matters and what doesn't. Someone who's already proven they can be discreet and valuable. You want me to spy for you. I want you to work for me in a legitimate capacity while occasionally sharing relevant information. In return, you receive protection, better pay, and the assurance that your family stays safe. It should have sounded insane. It should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I heard myself ask, what kind of information? The kind you're already noticing. Unusual meetings. Strange requests. People who don't fit their cover stories. He opened the folder, revealed what looked like employment contracts. You'd manage the VIP services at the lounge, coordinate private events, oversee high-profile clients. A promotion, essentially. A promotion that puts me in the exact position to gather intelligence. A promotion that puts you under my protection. His voice dropped lower. The Russians won't touch someone who works directly for me. It would be a declaration of war they can't afford. I looked at the contracts, at this man who'd turned my life upside down with a single conversation, at the choice he was offering that wasn't really a choice at all. If I say no, then I'll arrange for you to leave the city safely. New identity, fresh start, enough money to begin again. He met my eyes steadily. But you'll always be looking over your shoulder, and your family stays here unprotected. That's not really a choice. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. But I'm offering you honesty, Elena. That's more than most would give. I thought of my mother, my uncle, my younger sister still in college. I thought of my father, who'd fought against men like this and lost. And I thought of the card I'd kept, the call I'd made, the fact that some part of me had known, from the moment I'd spoken in that conference room, that my life had already changed. What's the catch? I whispered. Dante smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from harsh to devastating. The catch is that once you're in my world, Elena, you can't simply walk away. This isn't a job you quit when you find something better. So I'd belong to you. No. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. You'd belong to yourself, but you'd be under my protection. There's a difference. I didn't know if I believed him, but I signed the contracts anyway. The promotion was announced the next day. I became the VIP services manager at the Crystal Lounge with a salary that made my mother cry happy tears when I told her. She didn't ask questions, just assumed I'd finally gotten the recognition I deserved. If only she knew. My new office was small but elegant, tucked behind the main dining room with a view of the city skyline. The job itself was exactly what Dante had described: coordinating private events, managing high-profile reservations, ensuring wealthy clients received impeccable service. And noticing things, like the Italian businessman who came every Tuesday, always alone, always requesting the corner table where he could watch the doors, or the woman with the Russian accent who paid cash for a private dining room and never ate the food she ordered, or the city councilman who met with known criminals and pretended they were discussing charity fundraisers. I kept notes. Careful. Coded notes that would mean nothing to anyone searching my office, but everything to someone who knew what to look for. Twice a week, Luca would appear at closing time to escort me home for safety reasons. In the car, I'd share what I'd observed. He'd listen without comment, nod, and drop me at my apartment. I didn't see Dante for 2 weeks. I told myself I didn't care. This was a business arrangement, protection in exchange for information. The fact that I thought about his dark eyes and quiet intensity at inappropriate times was irrelevant. Then, on a Friday night, he walked into the lounge. I was reviewing seating charts when my assistant knocked on my office door. Miss Costa, Mr. Salvatore is here to see you. My heart kicked into overdrive. Send him in. He filled the doorway, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than my car. His eyes found mine immediately, and something in my chest tightened. Elena. Mr. Salvatore. I kept my voice professional, though my hands trembled slightly as I closed the chart. I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to see how you're settling into your new role. He closed the door behind him, and suddenly the office felt impossibly small. Any problems? None. The work is straightforward. And the other aspects? I knew what he meant. I've noticed some things. Luca has my reports. I've read them. He moved closer to my desk, picked up a crystal paperweight I'd been using to hold down Menace. You have a gift for observation. Most people see what they expect to see. You see what's actually there. My father taught me that. Your father taught you many useful things. He set the paperweight down, his gaze sharp. Have you been contacted by anyone? Approached with offers? Questions about your new position? No. Why? Because the Russians haven't given up. They've been watching you. Waiting to see if you'll make a mistake. Reveal a weakness they can exploit. Fear prickled down my spine. I've been careful, I know. But careful isn't always enough. He paused, seeming to consider his next words. I'm hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. Several important families will attend, Italian, Russian, Irish. A show of unity supposedly. Though in reality it's a chess match where everyone's looking for weaknesses. And you want me there. As the lounge's VIP services manager, coordinating with my event staff. It's a legitimate reason for your presence, and it puts you under my direct supervision for the evening. His eyes held mine. It also sends a message to certain parties that you're not an available asset. Because I'm your asset instead. Something flickered in his expression, annoyance, maybe, or something darker. Because you're under my protection. There's a difference, Elena, is there? The question came out sharper than I intended. Because from where I'm standing, I traded one cage for another. You think you're caged? He leaned against my desk, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. You have freedom most people in this city would kill for. Protection that costs me resources and political capital. A position that gives you access and influence. What cage exactly do you imagine you're in? I stood, refusing to let him loom over me. The one where I can't quit. Where I'm watching people for you, reporting on them. Becoming part of a world I never wanted to be part of. You became part of this world the moment you opened your mouth in that conference room. His voice was quiet but unyielding. I didn't put you in this cage, Alina. You walked into it yourself. I'm just making sure the door stays open. Open to what? More surveillance. More danger. A life where I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. Open to survival. He straightened, and the space between us crackled with tension. Your father fought against people like me and lost because he didn't understand the rules. I'm teaching you the rules so you can win. Win what? Your life. Your family's safety. A future where you don't end up as collateral damage in someone else's war. He reached out slowly, giving me time to step back if I wanted, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was gentle, almost tender, and it sent shivers down my spine. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., wear something elegant, I'll send a car. And if I refuse? You won't. His fingers lingered against my cheek for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Because you're smart enough to know that visibility is your best protection right now. And because, whether you want to admit it or not, you're curious. Curious about what? About my world. About the people who move through it. About the rules that govern everything. He stepped back, creating distance again. About me. He was right, and we both knew it. 7 p.m. I agreed quietly. He nodded, satisfied, and moved toward the door. But he paused with his hand on the handle, glanced back. Lena, yes, the dress. We're red. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my office with a racing heart and the disturbing realization that he understood me better than I understood myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dante's words. You walked into it yourself. He wasn't wrong. I'd made a choice in that conference room. And every choice since had pulled me deeper into a world I didn't understand. But what terrified me most wasn't the danger or the surveillance, or even the Russians watching my every move. It was the fact that when Dante had touched my face, when his fingers had brushed my skin with unexpected gentleness, I hadn't wanted him to stop. I'd wanted him to step closer, to touch me again, to look at me with those dark, knowing eyes and see something other than an asset or a liability. I'd wanted him to see me. And that realization was more dangerous than any threat from his enemies, because attraction in Dante Salvatore's world wasn't simple or safe. It was a weapon that could be used against you, a weakness that could be exploited, a complication that could get people killed. I pulled my pillow over my face and tried not to think about the fact that I'd agreed to wear red, tried not to think about why he'd asked, Tried not to think about tomorrow night and what it would mean to step further into his world, to be seen at his side, to cross another line I couldn't uncross. But sleep, when it finally came, was full of dark eyes and dangerous promises and the ghost of his touch against my skin. The dress arrived at noon. I stared at the box on my doorstep, black, expensive looking, with a simple card that read since red was a request, not a suggestion. Inside was the most beautiful gown I'd ever seen. Deep crimson silk that caught the light like liquid rubies, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that would flow like water when I moved. Elegant without being revealing, sophisticated without being pretentious. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Dante didn't do anything halfway. The car arrived at 6:30, not Luca this time, but a professional driver who opened the door without meeting my eyes. We drove to an estate even more impressive than Dante's home, a sprawling mansion lit up like a palace against the darkening sky. Guests were arriving in luxury cars and limousines. Women in designer gowns, men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. Everyone moving with the confidence of people who belonged in this world. I didn't belong here. But I stepped out of the car anyway, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the entrance with my head held high. Miss Costa. A staff member greeted me immediately. Mr. Salvatore is expecting you. This way, please. She led me through the main ballroom, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a string quartet playing classical music, and into a private salon off the main hall. Dante stood at the window, a phone pressed to his ear, but he ended the call the moment he saw me. His eyes swept over me, taking in every detail of the red dress, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. Perfetto, he murmured. I didn't speak Italian, but I understood the appreciation in his tone. You're staring, I said, trying to sound unaffected even as heat crept up my neck. I'm admiring. He crossed the room toward me, moving with that predatory grace that made my pulse quicken. There's a difference. As there, staring is passive. Admiring is intentional. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. You look stunning, Alina. The dress is beautiful. Thank you for... I'm not talking about the dress. His voice dropped lower, intimate. Though it does suit you perfectly. The air between us felt electric, charged with something I was afraid to name. We should probably join the gala, I managed. Soon. He didn't step back. First, you need to understand what tonight is. This isn't just a charity event. Every person in that ballroom is evaluating everyone else, looking for weaknesses, forming alliances, identifying threats. You'll be watched because you're with me. Questioned, perhaps, by people who want to know who you are and why you matter. And what should I tell them? The truth. You manage VIP services for one of my properties. You're here in a professional capacity to oversee coordination between venues. He reached up, adjusted an invisible imperfection in my hair, the gesture oddly intimate. But Alina, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, if anyone asks questions that feel wrong, you find me immediately. I can handle myself. I know you can. But in this world, handling yourself sometimes means knowing when to ask for help. His hand lingered near my face, and I could feel the heat of his skin. Do you trust me? The question caught me off guard. Did I? This man who'd pulled me into his world, who protected me while using me, who looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. I don't know. I admitted. He smiled, a real smile that softened his harsh features. Good. Trust should be earned, not given freely. But tonight, Elena, I need you to trust that I won't let anything happen to you. Why does this feel like more than just a business arrangement? The question hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to address. Because, he said quietly, his thumb brushing my cheek in a gesture that stole my breath, that stopped being just business the moment you looked me in the eyes and decided to speak. Before I could respond, before I could process what he meant, he stepped back and offered his arm. Ready? No, I wasn't ready. I'd never be ready for this, but I took his arm anyway. The ballroom was overwhelming. Hundreds of people in designer clothes, champagne flowing like water, conversations happening in multiple languages. Dante's hand rested lightly on my lower back as he guided me through the crowd, introducing me to people whose names I immediately forgot. Elena Costa, my VIP services manager at the Crystal Lounge. Over and over, the same introduction. Polite smiles, assessing looks, questions about my background that felt like interrogations disguised as small talk. I played my part perfectly. Professional, knowledgeable, just interesting enough to be memorable but not enough to be suspicious. But I felt them watching. Particularly one man, tall, blonde, with cold blue eyes that tracked my every movement. Russian based on his accent when he spoke to his companions. That's Alexei Kozlov, Dante murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. The Russian I mentioned. He's been watching you since we entered. Should I be worried? Not while you're with me. His hand pressed more firmly against my back, possessive. But don't engage with him alone. As if summoned by the warning, Alexei approached. He was handsome in a cold, calculated way, his smile sharp as a blade. Dante, he said smoothly. What a lovely event. And who is this? Elena Costa. She manages my VIP services. Charming. Alexei's eyes raked over me in a way that made my skin crawl. Tell me, Miss Costa, how did you come to work for Dante? It's so rare to find fresh faces in our circle. The emphasis on fresh felt deliberately provocative, through hard work and attention to detail. I replied evenly, the same way anyone earns their position. Attention to detail. Alexei's smile widened. Yes, I've heard you're quite observant. Noticing things others might miss. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Dante's hand tightened on my back. Elena excels at her job, which is why she's valuable to my organization. Of course. Alexei inclined his head. I simply wondered if her talents might be available for other opportunities. I'm always looking for perceptive people. She's not available. Dante said quietly, dangerously. The temperature between them dropped 20 degrees. Alexei raised his hands in mock surrender. No offense intended. Simply admiring quality when I see it. He looked at me again, his smile cold. Enjoy the evening, Miss Costa. I'm sure we'll speak again. He walked away, leaving tension crackling in his wake. He just made his move. I whispered, yes, and now everyone in this room knows you're off limits. Dante turned me to face him, his hand settling on my waist. Dance with me. What? The orchestra is playing, and we need to look natural. Dance with me, Elena. He didn't wait for agreement, just guided me onto the dance floor and pulled me into his arms. His hand was warm against my back, his other hand holding mine with surprising gentleness. We moved together, and somehow my body knew how to follow his lead. You're trembling, he observed. Alexei threatened me. Alexei postured. There's a difference. He spun me gently, bringing me back closer than before. But yes, he's interested in you now, which complicates things. Complicates how? Because interest from the Kozlov family is never casual. They'll watch you, test you, look for ways to turn you against me. His eyes held mine, intense and searching. Can they turn me against you? Yes. I thought about it honestly. This man had disrupted my life, pulled me into danger, used my skills for his own purposes. But he'd also protected me, been honest about the risks, given me choices even when they weren't really choices. No, I said quietly. They can't. Something shifted in his expression, relief maybe, or something deeper. Why not? Because you've never lied to me, and because... I trailed off, uncertain how to finish. Because I think you actually care whether I survive this. He pulled me closer, close enough that I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. More than you know, Elena. The song ended, but we didn't separate. We stood there on the dance floor, surrounded by dangerous people and complex politics, and for a moment it was just us. Just his hands on my waist and my hands on his shoulders, and the dangerous realization that whatever this was between us, it had stopped being purely professional a long time ago. I whispered. I know, he said quietly. I know, but he didn't let me go, and I didn't ask him to. The gala lasted another 3 hours. I played my role perfectly. Smiling at the right people, deflecting invasive questions, staying close to Dante without seeming dependent on him. But I felt Alexei's eyes on me throughout the night. Felt the weight of being watched and evaluated and targeted. When it finally ended, when the guests began trickling out and the staff started cleanup, Dante found me on a balcony overlooking the estate gardens. You did well tonight, he said, joining me at the railing. I felt like prey in a room full of predators. Because you were, but you didn't show fear, didn't make mistakes. That's impressive. He was quiet for a moment. Alexei will make contact soon. An offer, probably. Money, protection, freedom from me. It will sound appealing. And when he does, you tell me immediately. And you refuse, obviously. Obviously. I echoed, though something in my tone made him look at me sharply. Elena, whatever he offers, it's a trap. The Kozlov family doesn't do favors, they collect debts. I know. I turned to face him fully. But you collect things too, don't you? Information? Loyalty, people who might be useful. That's different? I was pushing, I knew, but something about the night, the dress, the dancing, the way he'd held me, had broken down my careful walls. You say I'm not caged, but I can't leave your employment. Can't refuse your protection. Can't make choices without considering how they affect your plans. I'm keeping you alive. I know. The words came out sharper than intended. I know you're protecting me, and I'm grateful I am. But Dante, what happens when the danger passes? When Alexei loses interest or finds another target? Do I get my life back, or am I yours forever? The word hung between us, yours. You were never mine to begin with, he said quietly, but something in his eyes contradicted the words. Wasn't I? The moment you gave me that card, the moment I signed those contracts, didn't I become yours in every way that matters? He stepped closer, and I could see the muscle working in his jaw. What do you want me to say, Alina? That I've been selfish? That I could have protected you from a distance but chose to keep you close instead? That every time Alexei looks at you, I want to put a bullet through his skull? My breath caught. Dante, you think you're the only one feeling caged. His hand came up, cupped my face with surprising gentleness. You think I wanted this? To care about someone in a world where caring is a weakness people exploit? You care about me. The question came out barely above a whisper. Didn't you notice? His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I shivered. The dress that fits perfectly, because I had you followed just to get your measurements. The car that's always available because I want to know you're safe. The fact that I brought you here tonight when I could have sent any staff member, but I needed you beside me. Why? Because somewhere between champagne and chess games, and watching you navigate my world with courage you shouldn't have to possess, you stopped being an asset and became something else. His forehead rested against mine, and I could feel his breath on my lips. Something I don't have words for. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. This is dangerous. Everything in my world is dangerous. No, I mean us. This, whatever this is. I pulled back slightly, needing to see his eyes. You said caring is a weakness people exploit. If someone figures out then we deal with it. His hand settled on my waist, holding me steady. Together. I'm not brave enough for this. You're the bravest person I know. He said it with such conviction that I almost believed him. You spoke truth to power in a room full of killers. You walked into my world with your eyes open. You're standing here now, arguing with me instead of running. Maybe I should run. Maybe. But you won't. How do you know? Because you want this as much as I do. His hands tightened on my waist. And because you're not a coward, Alina. You're just afraid. There's a difference. He was right. I was terrified. Of him, of what I felt, of what it meant to want someone who lived in shadows and violence. But I wasn't running. If we do this, I whispered, if we cross this line, there's no going back. I know. Your enemies will use me against you. Let them try. Dante? He kissed me, not rough or demanding, but soft, questioning, giving me room to pull away if I wanted. His lips were warm against mine, gentle in a way that contradicted everything I knew about him. I should have stepped back. Should have remembered all the reasons this was impossible, dangerous, stupid. Instead, I kissed him back. My hands found his chest, felt his heart racing as fast as mine. His arms wrapped around me, pulled me closer, and the kiss deepened, still careful, still restrained, but filled with weeks of tension and unspoken want. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Alana, he said, my name rough in his throat. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted. Neither do I. He pressed his forehead to mine again, his hands trembling slightly where they held me. But I know I don't want to let you go. Then don't. The words were permission and surrender all at once. He kissed me again, and this time there was less restraint. His hands moved up my back, tangled in my hair, and I made a sound I didn't recognize, something between a gasp and a plea. Not here, he murmured against my lips. Not like this. You deserve better than a stolen moment on a balcony. I don't care about better. I just care about, I know. He pulled back, his eyes dark with want and something that looked like pain. But I care about doing this right. About giving you the choice, the time, the safety to decide if this is really what you want. I want you. The admission fell from my lips before I could stop it. He closed his eyes like the words hurt. Cristo, Elena. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because my control where you're concerned is already hanging by a thread. He stepped back, creating physical distance even though I could see it cost him. Let me take you home. Let us both think clearly without champagne and moonlight, making everything seem simpler than it is. He was right. I knew he was right, but I also knew that thinking clearly wouldn't change what I felt. Wouldn't erase the fact that I'd crossed a line tonight that I couldn't uncross. Okay, I agreed quietly. The drive home was silent but charged. Dante sat beside me in the back of the car, not touching me but so close I could feel the heat of him. Once. His hand found mine in the darkness between us, squeezed gently, then let go. When we reached my apartment, he walked me to the door. "Elena," he said as I fumbled with my keys. I turned to face him. "What we started tonight, I need you to be sure. Because once we cross that line completely, once we give in to this, there's no protecting you from the consequences. People will know. They'll use it against us. Against you. I know. And you're willing to accept that." I thought about my father, about the lessons he'd taught me about courage and choosing your battles. This felt like both, a battle I was choosing, courage I was claiming. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." He kissed me one more time, soft and sweet and full of promise. Then he stepped back. "Lock your door. I'll have someone watching the building tonight. Dante, let me protect you. Elena. In all the ways I can." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night, and I was left standing in my doorway in a red dress that fit too perfectly. With swollen lips and a racing heart, and the terrifying knowledge that I'd just fallen for the most dangerous man in the city. 4 days passed without contact. I went to work, managed events, kept my notes, and tried not to think about Dante's kiss, or the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious and terrifying all at once. But I thought about it constantly. On Thursday night he called. "Come to my house," he said without preamble. "Please." The "please" undid me. Luca picked me up 20 minutes later. We drove through the city in silence, but this time I wasn't nervous. I was certain. Dante met me at the door himself, still in a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his tie long discarded. He looked tired, almost vulnerable. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You said please." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I've been thinking. About all the reasons this is a terrible idea. About every way this could go wrong. About the fact that caring about you puts a target on your back that you don't deserve." He stepped closer. "And I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Which is that I don't care." His hands cupped my face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "I don't care about the risks or the consequences or the politics. I just care about you." My heart stuttered. "Dante, tell me to leave you alone, Elena. Tell me you've changed your mind, that the gala was a mistake, that you want to go back to just business. Tell me, and I will. I'll protect you from a distance, keep you safe, but I'll let you go. And if I don't want you to let go, then I need you to be absolutely certain." His forehead rested against mine. "Because I won't be able to stop this. Once I have you, Elena, once we cross that line, I won't be able to pretend you're just an employee or an asset or anything other than what you actually are." "What am I?" "Mine," he breathed. "If you'll let me claim you." The possessiveness should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly. "I'm certain," I whispered. His control snapped. He kissed me with none of the gentleness from the balcony. This was hunger and need and weeks of restraint finally breaking. His hands tangled in my hair, tilted my head back, and I gasped against his mouth. "Upstairs." He murmured against my lips. "If we're doing this, I'm doing it right." He took my hand, led me through the mansion to his private quarters. His bedroom was elegant but masculine, dark woods, rich fabrics, floor, tuck-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. I should have been nervous. Should have felt out of my depth. Instead, I felt safe. Dante turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. "Last chance to change your mind." "I don't want to change my mind." My voice trembled slightly. I don't know what I'm doing." Understanding softened his expression. "You've never." I shook my head, heat flooding my cheeks. There were a few boyfriends in college, but nothing serious. Nothing like this. Nothing like what? Nothing that felt like it mattered. He closed his eyes briefly, like my words affected him physically. When he opened them again, they were dark with want and something tender. "Then we take this slow. We stop whenever you want. This is about you, Elena. Your comfort, your pleasure, your choice." He kissed me again, softer this time, and his hands moved to my shoulders. "May I?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He slid the straps of my dress down my arms with reverent slowness, his fingers trailing over my skin and leaving fire in their wake. The dress pulled at my feet, and I stood before him in just my undergarments, exposed and trembling. "Bellissima," he murmured. "You're shaking." "I'm nervous." "Don't be." He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the corner of my mouth. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "I'm ready. I struggled for words. "I don't know how to be confident about this." "You don't need to be confident. You just need to be honest." His hands settled on my waist, warm and steady. Tell me what you want, Elena. Even if it's just to stop and talk, even if it's to slow down, I'll give you anything you ask for. I took a shaky breath. I want you to touch me, to show me what this feels like. His jaw tightened with restraint. Where? The question sent shivers through me. I took his hand, guided it to my racing heart. Hair first. He smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his face. Then he kissed me again, and his hands began to explore with careful deliberation. Every touch was a question, every caress an offering. He learned my body like he was memorizing it, paid attention to every gasp and shiver, adjusted his approach based on my responses. When his fingers found the clasp of my bra, he paused. May I? Yes, I breathed. The garment fell away and his eyes darkened with desire. But he didn't rush, didn't grab. Instead, he kissed my shoulder, my collarbone, the valley between my breasts, taking his time, building anticipation until I was trembling with need. Dante, I gasped. Please? Please what, Kara? I don't know what to ask for. Then let me show you. He lifted me easily, carried me to the bed, laid me down with such gentleness it made my chest ache. And you tell me if anything doesn't feel right. What followed was an education in pleasure I'd never imagined. Dante was patient, attentive, completely focused on my responses. He touched me like I was precious, like every sound I made mattered, like my pleasure was more important than his own. When he finally removed the last barrier between us, when I lay completely bare before him, I expected to feel vulnerable. Instead, I felt powerful, because this dangerous man, this person who commanded fear and respect from everyone around him, was looking at me like I was the most important thing in his world. You're perfect, he said, his voice rough. Do you know that? I couldn't speak, could only reach for him, pull him down to me. He paused. Elena, are you sure? We can stop, we can. Don't stop. I whispered. Please don't stop. He kissed me deeply, and I felt him trembling with restraint. This might hurt at first. Tell me if it's too much. I nodded, trusting him completely. He entered me slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a moment of discomfort, a flash of pain that made me gasp, and he froze immediately. Breathe, he murmured, kissing my temple, my cheek, giving me time to adjust. Just breathe, Kara, I've got you. The pain faded, replaced by fullness, by an intimacy I'd never experienced. I wrapped my arms around him, held him close, and whispered, don't stop. He began to move, and it was nothing like I'd imagined. Every romance novel, every whispered conversation with friends, every fantasy, none of it compared to the reality of being this close to someone, of being joined with them completely. Look at me. Dante commanded softly, and I did. His eyes held mine as we moved together, as he showed me pleasure I didn't know existed, as my body learned rhythms I'd never danced. And when the tension built to something unbearable, when I shattered in his arms with a cry I couldn't contain, he followed me over the edge with my name on his lips. Afterward, we lay tangled together, sweat slicked and breathing hard. He pulled me against his chest, wrapped his arms around me like he was afraid I'd disappear. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I nodded against his shoulder. More than okay? I didn't hurt you? No. Well, maybe a little at first, but I tilted my head to look at him. You made it beautiful. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. He kissed me, deep and claiming and full of unspoken promises. You're mine now, Elena. You understand that? I should have bristled at the possessiveness. Should have reminded him I wasn't an object to be owned. But in that moment, wrapped in his arms and still feeling the aftershocks of what we'd just shared, all I could say was, less, because it was true. Somewhere in the past weeks, somewhere between danger and protection and stolen moments, I'd become his. And terrifying as it was, I didn't want to be anything else. We stayed in bed for hours, talking in whispers, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with physical intimacy. He told me about his father's death, about the weight of taking over the family business at 25, about the things he'd had to do to survive. I told him about my father, about growing up watching my mother work 3 jobs, about the fear that had lived in our house after Dad died under mysterious circumstances. He was trying to fight the corruption at the ports. Dante said quietly, I remember hearing about it. The union wanted to clean things up, and certain families didn't like that. Did you? I couldn't finish the question. No. My father was alive then, and he didn't involve himself in port politics. But I know who gave the order. His arms tightened around me, and I made sure they paid for it after I took control. I should have been horrified, should have pulled away from a man who spoke so casually about revenge and violence. but all I felt was a twisted sense of justice. Thank you. For what? For making them pay. For remembering. I pressed my face into his chest. For caring about a dead union worker you never met. I care about his daughter. He kissed the top of my head. More than I should. More than is safe. Is any of this safe? No, he admitted. But I'm going to protect you anyway. And wrapped in his arms, I believed him. I stayed at Dante's house that night and the next. We existed in a bubble where the outside world couldn't reach us, making love, talking, discovering each other in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn. But bubbles always burst. On Saturday morning my phone rang. My mother frantic. Elena, where are you? The police are here. They're asking about you, about your job, about... My blood ran cold. I'll be right there. Dante drove me himself, his face grim. This is Alexei's move. He's trying to separate you from me, make you vulnerable. What do I say? The truth. You work for me legitimately. You've done nothing wrong. He pulled up 2 blocks from my mother's house. I can't go with you, my presence would make things worse. But Luca will be watching. Anything feels wrong. You call me immediately. I kissed him quickly, then hurried to my mother's apartment. 2 detectives sat in her living room, a man and woman, both wearing expressions of professional concern. Miss Costa, the woman said. We have some questions about your employment. 3 hours of interrogation followed. They asked about Dante, about my promotion, about my access to private information. They implied things that I was laundering money, facilitating criminal enterprises, involved in activities I didn't understand. I stuck to my story. I managed VIP services. I coordinated events. Everything I did was legal and documented. They had nothing concrete, but they planted seeds of doubt. Men like Dante Salvatore don't give promotions out of kindness, Miss Costa. Whatever you think this is, you're being used. When they finally left, my mother grabbed my hand. Elena, what's happening? Are you in trouble? No, Mama, I promise. It's just complicated. Is this about that man? The one whose car you've been getting into? She'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. He's protecting me, I said quietly. From what? I couldn't answer that without revealing too much. From people who want to use me. But I'm safe, I promise. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. I called Dante the moment I was alone. They tried to scare me. I said, make me think you're using me. And did it work? His voice was carefully neutral. No, because I know the difference between being used and being valued. His exhale was audible. Come back to me, please. I shouldn't have gone alone. I took a cab instead of calling Luca, not wanting to seem dependent, needing to prove to myself I could still make independent choices. The car pulled up to Dante's gates. I paid the driver, stepped out, and someone grabbed me from behind. A hand over my mouth, an arm around my waist, and I was being dragged backward into a van I hadn't noticed. I tried to scream, tried to fight, but there were too many of them. 3 men, maybe 4, all moving with practiced efficiency. The van door slammed. Darkness, a hood over my head, and then Alexei's voice, smooth and cold. Hello, Miss Costa. We need to have a conversation about loyalty. Dante's POV, the security alert came through at 4:47 p.m., perimeter breach, subject taken. White van, no plates visible. Dante's blood turned to ice. Get me everything. He snarled at his head of security. Traffic cameras, satellite, witnesses. I want to know where they took her and I want to know Nandu. Luca appeared in the doorway. Sir, the Kozlov family. I know. Dante was already moving, already calling in every favor, every asset, every resource he had. Gather the men. Full tactical gear. We're getting her back. Sir, if we move against the Kozlovs without proof, I don't care about proof. Dante's voice was lethal calm. They took what's mine. I'm taking her back. Within 20 minutes, they had a location. An abandoned warehouse near the industrial district, classic Kozlov territory. Dante loaded his weapon with hands that didn't shake, though fury burned through his veins like acid. If they'd hurt her, if they'd touched her, if they'd... He couldn't finish the thought. We'll go in quiet, he told his men. No shooting unless necessary. Elena's safety is the priority. They moved out. Elena's POV. The hood came off in a concrete room that smelled of rust and fear. Alexei sat across from me, looking relaxed. 2 guards flanked the door. I apologize for the dramatics, he said pleasantly. But you've been difficult to reach privately. Kidnapping me seems excessive. Direct, I'll give you that. He leaned forward. Here's the situation, Miss Costa. You have information Dante doesn't want shared. Details about his operations, his weaknesses, his business dealings. I'm willing to pay handsomely for that information. I don't have anything you'd want. Don't you? His smile was cold. You're sleeping with him. You have access to his home, his private spaces, his unguarded moments. You know things. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. And you think I'd betray him? Why? For money, for survival. Alexei's tone hardened. Dante Salvatore is a dangerous man, Miss Costa. His enemies are numerous, and his protection only extends as far as his interest. The moment you stop being useful, I know what I am to him. The words came out stronger than I felt. And I know what you are, a man who kidnaps women because he can't win through legitimate means. Alexei's expression darkened. Careful. Why? You're going to hurt me either way. I stood, even though my legs trembled. If I give you information, you'll use it and then kill me to protect your source. If I refuse, you'll hurt me to send a message to Dante. So I might as well refuse with dignity. Brave words for a woman with no protection. I have protection. I met his eyes steadily, channeling every ounce of courage I didn't feel. You just made the mistake of taking it personally. The door exploded inward. Dante came through like vengeance incarnate, gun raised, his men flanking him. The guards reached for their weapons, but Dante was faster, 2 shots, precision perfect, and both guards dropped. Alexei stood slowly, hands raised. Dante, we were just talking? You kidnapped her. Dante's voice was death itself. You put your hands on what's mine. A misunderstanding, where you're concerned, Alexei. Everything's a misunderstanding right before someone dies. Dante moved toward me, his eyes never leaving the Russian. Elena, come here. I moved to his side on trembling legs. He put himself between me and Alexei, a human shield. This is a declaration of war, Alexei said calmly. You kill me, my family won't stop until. Your family will do nothing. Dante's smile was terrifying, because I have documentation of every illegal operation you run, every politician you've bribed, every murder you've ordered. Kill me and it all goes public. Touch her again and the same thing happens. Alexei's face paled slightly. We're leaving, Dante continued. And you're gonna let us walk out of here. Because the alternative is I put a bullet between your eyes right now and deal with the consequences later. The standoff lasted an eternity. Then Alexei stepped aside. This isn't over.
Yes,
Dante said quietly. It is. He pulled me toward the door, keeping his gun trained on Alexei until we were out of the building. The moment we reached the car, Dante pulled me into his arms, held me so tightly I could barely breathe. Cristo, Elena. Cristo. His hands were shaking. If they'd hurt you, I'm okay, I whispered, though I was trembling violently now that the adrenaline was fading. I'm okay. He pulled back, cupped my face, his eyes wild with something between fury and fear. Never again. You hear me? Never again do you go anywhere without Luca or me. Never again do you take chances with your safety. Dante, I can't lose you. The admission was raw, broken. I can't. Do you understand? I would burn this entire city down before I'd let someone take you from me. I kissed him, tasting desperation and relief and love neither of us had said aloud yet. I understand. I whispered against his lips. I understand. And driving back to his mansion, wrapped in his arms while his men secured the perimeter, I realized something terrifying. I would burn the city down for him too. The aftermath of my kidnapping rippled through the criminal underworld like a stone dropped in still water. Dante didn't retaliate immediately. That would have been expected, crude. Instead, he dismantled Alexei's operations piece by piece. A shipment intercepted here, a corrupt official exposed there, financial accounts frozen, allies turned, until the Kozlov family was hemorrhaging money and influence. I watched from inside the fortress Dante's mansion had become. Armed guards everywhere. Security systems that could probably detect a moth landing on the windows, and Dante himself, barely sleeping, constantly on calls, orchestrating his revenge with cold precision. A week after the kidnapping, I found him in his office at 3 a.m., staring at surveillance footage. You need to sleep, I said quietly. I need to make sure you're safe. I crossed the room, sat on the edge of his desk. I am safe. You've turned this place into a military compound. It's not enough. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and something darker, guilt. I put you in danger. My world, my enemies, my choices, they nearly got you killed. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He finally looked at me, and the pain in his expression made my chest ache. I pulled you into this knowing the risks. I was selfish. I wanted you close even though it meant making you a target. I chose to stay close, because you thought you didn't have a choice. No. I slid off the desk, moved to stand between his legs, forced him to look at me. I stayed because I wanted to. Because somewhere between champagne and danger and learning who you really are, I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between us. Dante's eyes widened, his breath catching. Elena, I love you, I said again, stronger this time. And yes, your world is dangerous. Yes, I've been kidnapped and interrogated and threatened. But I'm still here, not because I'm trapped, but because I choose you. He stood abruptly, pulled me into his arms. You shouldn't. You should run as far from me as possible. But I won't. I pulled back to look at him. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? He was silent for a long moment, his hands framing my face like I was something precious he was afraid to break. I'm giving you a choice, he finally said. A real one this time. I can arrange for you to leave, new city, new identity, enough money to start over safely. You'd be free of me, free of this life, free of the danger. My heart stuttered. And the alternative, you stay. You become part of this world fully, not as an employee or an asset, but as mine, my partner, he struggled with the word, my family. And what would that mean practically? It means protection, yes, but also visibility. Everyone would know you're important to me, which makes you valuable and dangerous. It means accepting that I do things you might not agree with. That violence is sometimes necessary. That the rules I live by aren't the ones you grew up with. It means accepting who you are. Yes, all of it. The good and the very bad. I thought about my father, about his fight against corruption that had cost him everything. I thought about my mother's warnings, about the safe, simple life I could have lived. And I thought about Dante, this complicated, dangerous man who'd protected me, treasured me, shown me passion and tenderness in equal measure, who looked at me like I was the most important thing in his dark world. I'm not my father, I said quietly. I'm not trying to change this world or fight against it. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not either. What does that mean? It means I stay. But I stay as myself. Someone who disagrees with violence when there are other options. Who'll challenge you when I think you're wrong. Who won't just nod and smile while you make decisions that affect both of us. A slow smile spread across his face. You want to argue with a mafia boss. I want to be your partner. Partners argue. Partners, he repeated like he was testing the word. Then he kissed me deep and claiming and full of promise. Yes, I can work with that. There's one more thing. I took a breath. I want to do something good with this position. The access I have, the information I gather, I want to use some of it to actually help people. Help people how? I don't know yet. Maybe protecting workers from exploitation. Maybe helping families caught in the crossfire. Maybe just. I struggled for words. Maybe finding ways to make sure people like my father don't get crushed by systems they can't fight. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's dangerous. Using information to help people can complicate alliances, create new enemies. I know. But if I'm going to be part of your world, I need to live with myself. And I can't do that if I'm just complicit. Complicit. He smiled slightly. Most people would kill for the protection and luxury I'm offering. You want to use it for social justice. Is that a problem? No. He pulled me closer. It's exactly why I love you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You think you're the only one who fell? He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. Elena, I've been in love with you since you stood in that conference room and risked everything to speak truth. I just didn't have a name for it until now. Tears pricked my eyes. We're insane. You know that, right? This is insane. Completely. He grinned, a real, genuine grin that transformed his face. But I've built an empire on insane decisions. What's one more? I laughed despite myself, despite everything. So what happens now? Now we figure out how to navigate this together. You challenge me when I'm wrong. I protect you from the consequences. We argue, we compromise, we build something that's ours. And the danger, Alexei and whoever comes after him, will learn that touching you means war. His expression hardened. I've made that very clear. But destroying his operations, but making an example. No one who harms you walks away intact. That's not negotiable, Elena. You can argue with me about business decisions and moral choices, but on this, your safety is my line in the sand. I understood what he was saying. In his world, strength was the only language that mattered. Mercy was weakness. And protecting what was his meant being willing to destroy anything that threatened it. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt safe. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, you'll stay, or okay, you understand, both. I kissed him softly. I'll stay. I'll be yours. I'll argue with you and challenge you and probably drive you crazy. But I'm not going anywhere. He held me like I was his salvation and his damnation all at once. And maybe I was. Maybe we were both each other's, the light that exposed the darkness that protected the light. It wasn't simple. It wasn't clean. It wasn't the fairy tale ending I'd imagined as a girl. But it was real. It was ours. And for now, that was enough. 3 months later, I stood in what used to be my father's union hall. It had been abandoned for years, left to rot after the union was crushed and the workers scattered. But Dante had bought it quietly, renovated it, and handed me the keys. "What is this?" I'd asked when he first brought me here. "Your project. Whatever you want it to be." Now it was a community center, legal aid for workers, resources for families caught in the crossfire of gang violence, education programs for kids who needed options beyond the streets. It was legitimate. Legal. Everything operated within the bounds of the law, but it was funded by Dante's money. Protected by his influence. And everyone who walked through those doors knew exactly who made it possible. The irony wasn't lost on me, using Mafia money to help people escape the systems that fed the Mafia. But Dante had been right that night in his office in his world. Everything was complicated. There was no pure good, no simple right and wrong. There was just what you could live with. "You're thinking too hard," Dante said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. We were alone in the building, having just finished a meeting with the staff. He'd insisted on attending, on seeing what I'd built with his resources. "I'm thinking about my father," I admitted. What he'd think of this. Of me. He'd be proud. Would he? I turned in his arms. "I'm in love with a man who represents everything he fought against. I'm using criminal money to fund legitimate work. I'm sleeping with the enemy." Am I the enemy? I looked at him, this man who'd threatened and protected and loved me in equal measure. Who'd dismantled Alexei's empire to keep me safe. Who funded my projects without demanding control. Who argued with me about ethics and morality and still let me make my own choices. "No," I said quietly. "You're the complication I chose." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made my heart skip. "I'll take that." We stood there in my father's union hall, now a community center. A symbol of hope built on foundations of darkness, and I realized something important: I would never be purely good. Not after the things I'd seen, the choices I'd made. The man I'd chosen to love, but I could still do good. Still make a difference. Still honor my father's memory while acknowledging that the world was more complicated than he'd taught me. "I have something for you," Dante said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Not a ring, too soon for that, and we both knew it. Instead, a key. "What's this for?" "The house. Official access. Your name on the security clearances. Whatever you want to call it." He paused. "Move in with me." Officially, my breath caught. That's a big step. We've already taken bigger ones. But if you're not ready, I'm ready. I closed my fingers around the key. "But I'm keeping this place. My work here doesn't stop. I wouldn't ask it to." He pulled me closer. "I love you for who you are, Alina. Including the parts that challenge me, even when I'm annoyingly moral. Especially then." He kissed me softly. "You make me want to be better. Not good, I'll never be good. But better than I was, though. That's all any of us can do." We locked up the center and drove home to his mansion, now our home. The guards nodded as we passed. The household staff greeted us warmly. Everything was familiar now, comfortable. But that night, lying in bed with Dante's arms around me, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your father's death wasn't an accident. Ask Dante about the Romano family contract 2022. Some truths are worth knowing." My blood turned to ice. I should have shown Dante immediately. Should have trusted him with this. Instead, I deleted the message and closed my eyes. Because some truths, I realized, were dangerous. Some questions led places you couldn't come back from. And some choices, like loving a man whose world operated in shadows, meant accepting that there would always be secrets. Always be complications. Always be consequences you couldn't anticipate. Dante's breathing was even beside me, one arm draped possessively over my waist. Safe, protected, loved, but also owned in a way I'd never fully escape. The Romano family, 2022. The year before I met Dante. The year the union had finally collapsed completely. I pushed the thought away. I'd made my choice. I was building something good from complicated foundations. I was in love with a dangerous man who loved me back with fierce intensity. That had to be enough. Even if it wasn't entirely clean. Even if there were shadows I chose not to examine too closely. Even if the price of love in this world was accepting that some truths would remain buried. I fell asleep in Dante's arms, the deleted message burning in my mind, and dreamed of my father standing in the union hall, not condemning me but not blessing me either. Just watching. Waiting. To see what I would become. 6 months later, the community center was thriving. We'd helped 70 families navigate legal issues, provided scholarships for 30 kids, and created a safe space in a neighborhood that desperately needed one. Dante's enemies had learned their lesson. No one touched me. No one even looked at me wrong. But I'd also learned something in his world. Peace was just the space between conflicts. Alexei was gone, but there would be others. Always others. And the text message about my father, I'd never followed up. Never asked Dante about the Romano family contract, because some questions once asked couldn't be unasked. Some truths couldn't be unknown, and I'd chosen this life with my eyes open. Chosen love over certainty. Chosen complication over simplicity. Was it the right choice? I didn't know. But watching Dante interact with the kids at the center, tough and distant but never cruel, occasionally almost gentle, I thought maybe it didn't matter. Maybe in this world, in this life, right was too simple a word for what we'd built. Maybe all that mattered was that we'd chosen each other. And that every day I chose to stay, even knowing the shadows, even carrying the questions, even understanding that the price of safety was sometimes ignorance, and the cost of love was sometimes complicity. I chose to stay, and that choice, dark and complicated and imperfect as it was mine.